Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about rumors and cyber crises. So I have a presentation here based off some content that's in the Kathleen Fern-Baines book, and also just some examples that are really useful. I have a couple of videos that I don't really like to play with this. I'll also include those links below if you want to consult those. The best one I think in Rumors in Africa video. Meningitis vaccines in Africa and the importance of dispelling rumors concerning that. I've also got a video in here about wildfires in Malibu and how Edelman, the public relations company, dispelled those. I also have a video from AP about Upshaw, who was a former NFL Players Association leader. So all of those are included in here. If you're more interested in the sports portion of this, I will be posting another lecture about crisis communications in sports that will be posted later this week. So you're welcome to look at that. Let's get started. So I like to kind of start this lecture with this idea of a song by Adele called Rumor Has It. You guys have probably heard it. So rumor has it that you've been telling lies, or have you? I think we've all had a time in our life where we've experienced a rumor, right? So somebody said something about us or somebody else that we've kind of been like, oh, is this the truth? You know, I had experience in middle school where basically someone who got in trouble decided that they were going to cause an issue for me by saying that I did something I didn't do. So the fact is that like a rumor can start anywhere, right? And it's sometimes hard to figure out exactly where the rumor has started or what it is that we're trying to understand based off of the rumor. You know, or if it's even a legitimate rumor. So there's different types of rumors. We'll talk about those. But I want you to just kind of think about your personal perspective, and if there was a specific rumor that you thought maybe affected you or organization, and you know, just take a minute to think about that, write it down, because it's really good to have a picture of something in your mind before we kind of start this conversation. So really, really it's important, especially in times when lots of information is being putting out, to think about everything you see on the internet and is it true or not. Now we have some really great ways to fact check. With Agence France Presse, there's a really great fact check organization. Within that news organization, there's factcheck.org, there's PolitiFact, there's all these different places that you can actually check news information. But a lot of times as a crisis communicator, the ability to verify facts and confirm whether or not something's true or false solely relies on you as the crisis communicator. The question is there a difference between truth and fact? Yes, there is. Truth is more of a philosophical idea, right? So the idea that we can all know what truth is, and truth is sometimes based in ethical values. It's also based in belief systems and religiosity. But facts don't change, right? Facts are the description of what we actually can see and understand. So it's really important to understand the difference between truth and facts. A lot of people like to use the phrase fake news. I really don't like that phrase because I believe that there's either factual information, which is news, or there's opinionated news. And so those two differences are really important to distinguish, right? And the truth is anyone can take the facts and try to convey a certain truth, but we need to understand the facts themselves can't change. This person did this at this time for this reason, right? Where we get kind of iffy is the how come question, right? So how come this happened? Why are people acting this way? You know, those things are attached to human beings and to groups of human beings, and therefore they can be fallible, right? So while someone says this is the truth, they really need to ground their truth in facts, especially in crisis communication. So truth is something which depends on a person's perspective and their experience. It's not necessarily entirely based off the facts. It's about how they interpret the facts. And so as a public relations practitioner or crisis communicator or journalist, you have to understand that whatever it is that you convey with your facts could be taken as the truth by people. And so there's a big responsibility associated with that. So here's an example of this. So there were a bunch of wildfires in California. This happens consistently as a result of climate change issues. It gets really dry in California, and then maybe somebody throws a cigarette out their window or leaves an unattended campfire, and we end up with issues like this. And so in Malibu, California, there was a really big problem with wildfires. Let me see if I can get this clip to play for you guys. But basically, they were giving people all the facts of what was happening, but the narrative was that all of Malibu was on fire, right? So it was really important for Edelman to clarify those facts and get the specific facts out so that people could be prepared to respond. And the other problem was people were starting to cancel their trips to the beach because Malibu has a lot of beaches associated, but this was actually in the mountains. And most of the people on the beaches were not really at risk for this fire. And so, you know, it wasn't like all of California was on fire. It was just this isolated area, which just so happened to be a very large area in the Malibu community.
Let's check in now with our latest information regarding the fire. Our update, we promise at every half hour. It's breaking news, of course. The Malibu wildfire known as the Corral Fire. 2,200 acres have burned and 35 homes destroyed.
And 200, at least a couple hundred homes threatened, maybe many more. There are 600 plus ground crews fighting this fire. We understand one firefighter suffered a minor injury. We don't know his exact condition right now, but it doesn't look too serious at this point.
And strong winds continue to pose problems for the firefighters. Not as brisk as last month for the Canyon fire, but a major concern nonetheless with the low humidity and the gusting winds from time to time.
At least 10,000 people have been evacuated in this fire. As many as 14,000 people have been evacuated. And the perimeter of this event.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here in this video concerning California wildfires, but you can see very clear they have evacuations information. They have information about how many homes. What Edelman did really well is they said, these are the areas that are affected, and they gave very specific streets. They got, you know, specific locations out, and that really actually helped people to evacuate properly, but also to kind of mediate some of the panic that was going on. A lot of times if people don't have specific understanding of what's going on, they're more likely to panic or revert to certain crisis kind of strategies that they're familiar with for other situations, right? So in the situation of like South Floridians, you know, if there's a hurricane coming, there's certain things that you do to prepare for that hurricane. If there's a tornado, we know there's certain things we do to prepare for a tornado because we're taught those as children. So, you know, if we don't know what to do and no one tells us what to do specifically with our messaging, we're going to revert to the things that we know we should do, right? And so for a lot of people, this is like things that aren't necessarily connected. So, you know, stocking up on paper goods and water might be really great when you're going through a hurricane, but if it's a disease outbreak, it's not necessarily the best thing to do, right? Because you're putting yourself at risk by going to a store with a bunch of people. So that's something, you know, we need to do as crisis communicators, is give people information that's very tangible that they can act on. So there's lots of problems with rumors. So the first one is this idea of, you know, there's people spread things through word of mouth. We know from media richness theory that word of mouth is the most applicable and most serious kind of information, right? So if somebody sells something to you face to face, you're going to remember it so much better than if you're reading a text message. That's because of the relational aspect of it, right? Psychology says that, you know, there's actual things that happen when I look at you and you look at me and we make exchanges of information and we're standing there. We actually have these chemicals from our body that interact. So word of mouth is seen as very trustworthy, right? There's also this idea of like, you know, sending out emails to people, right? So if it comes from a trusted source, emails often are trusted, right? So if I opt into a certain company and I have trust with that company, I'm going to trust what they send me. For example, I have a Sprint service on my cell phone. If Sprint sends me something, I'm going to trust that it came from Sprint, right? However, we know that people can duplicate emails and manipulate emails now, so we have to be really careful about where the source of that information even comes from too. Rogue websites. So someone might create a website to either attack your company or pretend to be your company or your organization. So a really good example of this is when Jeb Bush was running against our current president, Donald Trump, in the Republican primary. Some people went and bought the website jebbush.com and posted a bunch of fake information on it that wasn't true. This was a really big problem, right? Because Jeb Bush himself hadn't said a lot of those things that were posted on a website, but it was attributed to him, right? So thinking about websites, and then also bloggers who might go after your company or have conversation around whatever it is that's going on. So in addition to, having to write things with the news media, we have these other issues that we're dealing with. So a lot of times like I said, we have no idea where this stuff starts, where it comes from. By monitoring, you can get an idea kind of where some information comes from, but it gets really difficult. And as we've noticed with like the Facebook information and, fake accounts on Twitter and Facebook, sometimes people pretend to be things that they aren't. This can be eliminated with a process of verification through those organizations, but it could also be something that you as an organization can't determine, right? You can't figure out these things. You sometimes don't know how long a rumor's been out there, and sometimes it might be an old rumor that's resurfaced, and you're trying to combat that issue, right? You're trying to get an idea of, well, when did this happen? Who said it? Where did it come from? How big of a threat is it, right? And then thirdly, it's hard to decide, is this a legitimate concern, or is this just a crazy person saying something, right? Is this just my Uncle Al who believes in conspiracy theories, or is it actually something that's going to destroy my company or my organization or my personal reputation, right? So knowing those things is very important. So I had a question for you guys. What is the most trusted source of information? What do you guys think? So most research says that the most trusted source of information, like I said, is face-to-face communication, right? So if I can see someone's face, I can see how they feel, I can see how they're responding, I can see the lines in their face, right? I'm going to have the most trust of them. The other thing is we trust people we already know and have an established relationship with. But overall, if you're in a news organization, you might not have that benefit of having a relationship with every individual customer or stakeholder or person in your public, right? So the thing that's going to be most trusted is information that comes from that organization, right? So the spokesperson for that organization directly sharing their information or their personal experience or their concerns with their public is going to be the most trusted form of information. So that idea of face-to-face communication, really sitting down, if you're working with internal publics, getting that information out internally to your organization is very important and is vital to the way that we interact. Being accessible also can make a difference, right? So having accessibility and having people being able to obtain that information, right? So making sure they get that video in their hands, making sure they're present for the press conference or the meeting. Those things are going to be super important to dispelling rumors. So there's lots of different types of rumors. There are malicious rumors, so rumors that are meant to harm, but sometimes there's innocent rumors, or there's things that we assume and we say. So for example, someone tells us something to destroy a coworker or a friend. I read an article in the New York Times about a professor who was competing with another professor for a job, and he put a post up on Reddit and then basically caused her and her partner a bunch of harm as a result of that. That was a malicious rumor. That was something that wasn't true. Whereas an innocent rumor might be like, oh, I just assumed that this person didn't like me, right? I never had that conversation. And then you tell people that they don't like you, or you assume this company has a certain affiliation because of a statement they make or a product that they put out, right? Those might be innocent rumors because it's based off of the information that you have or an assumption, but you're not really intending for it to cause a lot of problems. So an example of this is when Johnny Carson made a joke about how there was no bathroom tissue available, and people basically left watching television to go out and buy bathroom tissue. This might sound familiar to you guys. Another example of this, is something like this incidents with McDonald's saying they were going to provide IRAs In the UK, IRA, the acronym, has a very different meaning in the UK than it does here. So it's, you know, considered to be a terrorist organization. And so that same story in the United States was not interpreted the same way as it was in the UK, and people basically stopped going to McDonald's for a period of time until they could right this issue. Here's some other case studies. So Procter and Gamble, a conservative blogger or publication, put out information about the fact that they used a Satanist symbol for their symbol. The symbol's here. You can see it. It's a, you know, a moon. Procter and Gamble, however, didn't actually ever think of that. They just thought it was a pretty symbol, and the guy really liked a certain constellation, which is depicted in the symbol. But it caused a lot of conservatives to actually stop buying Procter and Gamble products, and then saying Procter and Gamble supported things that they considered to be unethical and not in line with their conservative values. Another example of this is also in the Kathleen Fernbanks book, and it's about Snap's Burger Chain, which was in, I think, Boca Raton, Florida, Vero Beach, Florida, in that area, so Palm Beach County, which is actually where I am, so that's kind of funny. But girl was angry with somebody who worked there. She made flyers, put them all over school, saying that someone at the burger chain had AIDS. This was during the 1990s when AIDS was really, we didn't know a whole lot about it, when people were really scared of it. And so put them all over her high school, and people stopped going. Local news got a hold of it. They did trace it back to the person who did it, and she was asked to apologize. But by then it had already done a lot of economic damage to the organization. So there are 6 types of rumors. There's intentional rumors shared to create a certain outcome or goal. There are premature fact rumors. So we talked a lot in the media lecture about how if we have a premature fact, sometimes people, even the news media, will assume certain things like, this was the intention, or this is actually what happened, because they don't have the information, right? So it's an early version that maybe becomes the truth. Sometimes though, those things that are assumed become the truth, and people aren't able to recover from that, and organizations really have a hard time writing that narrative. Malicious rumors. So when someone does something malicious, we've already talked a little bit about this, but they want to be harmful to your reputation or your business, or your ability to get a job, or your ability for longevity as an organization. And then there's this idea of outrageous rumors. So it's something that you're like, whoa, that like can't be true. So it must be true, because nobody would do that, right? So that's something also that we think about, is this idea that something is super outrageous and crazy, so it's gotta be a true story. I was trying to think of an example of that. So an outrageous rumor might be something like, you know, we've seen a lot of this with the Me Too movement. Like, how could that person have possibly done that, right? You know, and assuming that a person is innocent because they haven't actually been proven guilty, right? Even though the evidence is clearly pointing to that, right? Or the other way around, right? So that has to be false, because there's no way that could happen, right? So we've seen a lot of this with the coronavirus coverage. You know, like, that isn't going to affect me. That's not here. That's in another country. You know, we saw a lot of this with Ebola as well. So this idea of nearly true rumors, partially true. So they take on untruths that seem more true, right? So this idea that, you know, being, it's got a little bit of truth in it, so it might be real. And that's very similar to this idea of premature facts, like it's got partial truth, so it might be true. So this would be an example of like, vaccines cause autism, right? So yes, there are in certain cases where vaccines have been released to certain health conditions that kids develop later in life. But there is actually no research that shows a direct correlation between autism and getting your child vaccinated. That's really hard for people to hear, right? And a lot of times people want to say, oh, well, that research doesn't justify this or whatever, even though part of it might be true, the rest of it is not true. Then there's this idea of birthday rumors. So things that come up every year. Sometimes these turn into urban legends, right? So we've heard lots of urban legends about how, you know, on Halloween, a certain thing happens in a town, or will this happen again because it happened last year at this time, right? For a while, there was a lot of association with the anniversary of Columbine, that, you know, certain things were going to happen as a result of that. We've also, you know, had this, like, it's hurricane season, we're all going to prepare for a certain hurricane, you know, and so rumors kind of start spreading about that. The best way to dispel any of these rumors is with factual information, right? So we have the factual information that's been vetted and verified. We share that as soon as we can. I'm going to play this video. If it doesn't work for you for this section, the link is in the video thing at the bottom. It's just another video that's on YouTube.
West Africa is in the so-called meningitis belt, where the deadly disease meningitis has affected 1 million people since 1988. Over the last 10 years, scientists have developed a vaccine they hope will eliminate the disease. It's called Menafrivac. The flexibility of the new vaccine means that even the most remote nomadic communities can be reached. But there's a major obstacle to the success of any new medical initiative that has nothing to do with logistics or clinical effectiveness.
When anything new happens, there are always worries and rumors, and so it's part of life that you are worried when something new comes. However, whenever a rumor occurred, we were able to strongly show the evidence that this was unfounded.
Overcoming the suspicion of a community is vital to ensure the widespread acceptance of vaccination and to prevent these crises occurring. Dr. Sambaso's team in Mali have been running clinical trials on Menafrivac over the last 8 years. He realized the importance of working with women to allay their concerns.
Every time you talk about introducing a new vaccine, you're talking about training vaccinators, training the field workers, and training families, parents, on what is the vaccine, what is the importance of a vaccination. The first children who will be vaccinated will be my own children. So if it's something not safe, I don't know why I would take my own babies to receive this. So these vaccines are absolutely very safe.
At a community meeting in Mali, some of the mothers who Dr. So had been working with came to share their experiences. Their decision to ignore rumors surrounding the vaccine hadn't been easy.
Ambara bulubala amese so jugoni nga munyala jo kana nande joli fere ode kacha do ka ame joli fere do ka ame na ube bolochi ande unte wolo akoma ka mangene nyere banana de ase de pinga fichini yo first sama de liga bana.
Far from selling blood, it was essential to test blood plasma from clinical trial participants to see how well the vaccine had worked. Serum samples were sent to this laboratory in the United Kingdom, which is the globally recognized lab for meningococcal serology.
The tests basically showed that before vaccination, the individual serum was not killing the bacteria, but after vaccination, there was very high levels of killing in serum. And this is really quite crucial. To license a vaccine, you need to show high levels of killing in the individual serum. It's absolutely crucial that the blood samples are tested, and once they are tested, they're always either returned to the originating sites or, if asked, destroyed on site.
Religious leaders also played a key part in dispelling harmful rumors.
ka bu balidini la ka mo go balidini so la American ya bla wori la ka mo go balidini so la atu we fem bo foka ka to jeng mai am ya na fa ya fana ya fo mo go yi mo wala na so ra ta de chi.
At a launch for the vaccine in Mauritania, street theatre was used to convince people of the safety and efficacy of modern medicine. The play shows a traditional healer using herbal remedies on a meningitis patient. At last, an ambulance is called and the patient is rushed into hospital in an attempt to save his life. But just as important was the presence of the Minister of Health, who had travelled all the way from the capital city to attend the launch. His very public support for the vaccination campaign will be instrumental in the programme's success. Elders were also brought into the campaign to share their positive experience that any community can be convinced if properly informed.
دخلت مشروع على السيدة ولاية التراسة هون اللي مولينا مريض تكوننا فيه من سنتين متقطع من وفاة وهم عاطين رخص ما هي مادة أقل من البادية قال لي ما عندهم اعتبار للصحة ولا يتلقوا الأكل اللي يتلقوا الصحيين ولا وعر عليهم التنظيم. ولكن الناس اللي مكذبة ذاك يعني يقيمك احنا هذا كمجتمع مدني.
And all means of communication, from the traditional to the modern, are employed to spread the message.
تحسيس عن طريق ايش؟
عن التليفون مساج.
عن طريق التليفون.
At the community meeting in Mali, Dr. Samba Sow watches on as traditional hunters dance. Considered to be protectors of the community, their presence at the meeting shows that the vaccine has been accepted.
I'm starting to see the end of a tunnel. I'm starting to see the sun. Because I have seen children dying from meningitis in this country, not a long time ago. And I know that this vaccine is a very good vaccine.
Dr. Samba Sow is asked to dance, a final seal of approval. He too can protect the community with the new vaccine.
So this video is really useful because it gives us an idea of how getting certain facts out and having relationships can really dispel a lot of these challenges that we might face. So when we have a rumor, we want to go and combat it kind of step by step, right? And so you guys might be familiar with like running bleachers in high school. I was in cross country in high school and I remember running up and down the bleachers. And the challenge with it is like, it looks really daunting when you're going up, right? And you kind of like have to get your footing right so that you make sure that each step is in time and you don't trip. So this is a step-by-step process of detecting and preventing the spread of rumors. So the thing is, rumors are going to happen. They're going to be out there and you're really going to have to work to dispel them. And you should be prepared that that's going to be a good portion of your job, especially with a lot of information being online and social media information. So first we need to establish a center to collect rumor information. Who is going to do that? So knowing which people are going to do that, what tools we're going to use. We're going to use Google Alerts if we're going to go search on social media for our company's name. If we're going to collect that information with like Hootsuite or HubSpot or something like that. Also training and rumor control. So what messaging are we going to use? Who is going to respond? How are we going to put that information from one person to the next? Workshops and communication plans. So how does this fit with our regular crisis communication plan that we have, or do we need to have a separate plan specifically for rumors? You know, so doing that, also this idea of a reputation check. So not just looking at what's online, but maybe messaging people or setting up meetings with people to determine, hey, what does our company look like to you? What does our organization look like? What does my candidate look like? What does our university look like? So checking the reputation with either focus groups or conversations with individuals that are influencers or stakeholders. Keeping information circulating to all your publics by concerning yourself with internal publics, so making sure your employees know what's important first, and then thinking about your external publics, right? So if you get it right internally, it's easier to maintain a good perception outside of your organization, and also evaluate destructive rumors and how destructive they can be. So what are the implications if this gets out, right? Very similar to the risk assessment that we did when we were establishing our crisis plan. So who might be affected? What kind of money will we lose? That kind of stuff. And so by having the specific step-by-step process, we can think about in detail how we should approach that, right? We can see, you know, several cases where people haven't done those things, right? When we look at rumor control, how people haven't done those things and haven't empowered themselves to take action, and then the rumor kind of gets out of control. So yeah, think of it like bleachers, like I said. So going up and coming down, right? So it's easier to do this step-by-step process, because then when you get into that rhythm, you can already be prepared when a rumor comes around, and you can combat it head on and deal with it right there in the time that you have. And we know from social media, crisis communication strategy, that you really need to respond, you know, really within the first hour of a rumor getting out, because a rumor can grow and morph into something that's not necessarily positive for your organization very quickly, and take over the narrative of the story. So a very good example of this is Norman Rockwell's telephone painting, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Woman tells a story, and at the very end, it comes back to her, right? There's this understanding, though, that rumors will get back to the people that make them, right? So if you release bad information, we can actually source that. We can trace IP addresses. We can try to do investigations to figure out who did that. So it's really important to know, know who's going to say it. And also sometimes when it starts, it might seem very innocent, but it could change into something that's completely destructive, right? And it could hurt you or the people that work for you or the organization. So, you know, that's why it's really important to just release factual information and not change, not release information that you don't have verified or you don't have entirely fixed. If you want some additional information on how to release information to the public, you can go to my spokesperson lecture, which is really great. And that'll give you a little bit more information about interacting with the public. So again, step-by-step process. This last part, though, evaluation, is super important for how we respond to future crises as well, because we need to evaluate not only how destructive it can be now, but how destructive it can be long-term, and how that might affect the way that we interact in the public space, our economic stability as a company, and also the level of trust that people have for us, right? There's a lot of research in public relations research about trust, right? And how trust is a really big factor in whether or not your company gets people engaged with it, develops a good relationship with it, right? And so, you know, while we are concerned about short-term implications, like are we losing money, or are we, interacting with our customers the right way, what really the most important thing is this going to affect our long-term relationship and the way that people think of us and trust us long-term, and how that affects our reputation. So like I said, social media and online rumors, our biggest concern. 90% of rumors are started on social media. A lot of people say you don't need to respond. I would say yes, you need to respond. You always need to respond. If something is inherently wrong, you need to write it. You need to say, hey, this is not the right source of information. And I would even say that as individuals, we have this responsibility. So when we see somebody releasing information that isn't accurate, we should be saying, hey guys, actually, there's this paper that says this. There's been lots of research done on this by Nature, the journal, about this disease. It's not new. It's been here for a while. Like Ebola actually doesn't do this, or no, this company or organization didn't actually say this. So you have to respond. And I think we all have this responsibility as people in the communication space to write wrong information. You need to be strategic. You need to think about, okay, these are the messages I'm going to respond to, or these are the messages another person in an organization is going to respond to, or these are the pre-prepared messages that we have to respond to these things, right? Or we're going to do this through direct message versus tweeting at them, or we're going to do this by contacting people over email. You know, we need to speak with one voice. So we can't have multiple people from our company saying different things or being formal or informal about it, or some people being really sure of what they're saying and some people being unsure of what they're saying. We need to all work together with one voice. Communicate your concern. Empathy is so important. Empathy trumps anger at any point. Yes, you might be angry, but you need to be angry to a point that you're showing empathy to those who are also affected. Later in the semester, I usually talk about individuals in crisis and how empathy is so important to how we cope with crisis, right? So if somebody's not empathetic, it's really difficult for us to understand how to move through something, right? And so we understand that our publics have those challenges. And as a spokesperson, as an organization, as a public relations person, we need to think about how to help those people mitigate whatever it is they're feeling. About our organization, about the situation they're in, even if it isn't our fault. Using the right tone. So sometimes, you know, something's really somber and sad. We need to keep it somber and sad, right? If people are dying, you don't want to come off too pompous or too much of a jerk. And that can be really hard, especially when communicating in text. So this is why it's important to eliminate certain things like emojis or hashtags that might have duplicitous meanings, right? I talk about that in my social media writing lecture, you know, so like there are things that are good, but there are some things that can be a problem. Using responses that just seem base or, you know, we'd say like tone deaf, right? If they were speaking, you know, so knowing if it should be more formal or it should be more personable as well. And then using this as an opportunity to establish new connections, get more people engaged in the conversation, get people to share their information, right? Those are all important. So when you're fighting a rumor, you want to release complete, accurate information. You want to analyze the rumor. So, hey, what is this rumor actually saying? And is there any truth to it, right? What kind of rumor is it? Is it, you know, somebody jumping to conclusions, or is it really based on some facts, or is it just partial fact, or is it meant to be malicious? You might do nothing, but if the rumor persists, address it. But some rumors you actually have to address, right? You could deny the rumor publicly and vehemently if it's not true, right? You could say, this has nothing to do with us. We didn't say this. I don't know where you got this information. But you need to make sure that you know that's the problem. You want to be convincing. You want to get other experts involved if for some reason people aren't listening to you, or it might seem really out of the blue, right? You know, if somebody says there's a zombie attack, right? Like you might want to get somebody who can actually come in and say, no, we have no confirmation that there's a zombie attack, right? That would be really useful. And then you might even run ads online to dispel rumors. So like telling a narrative of your company that is, hey, our company actually does this and this is really not a problem. I've seen this a lot with the anti-vaxxer movement. I've also seen this with like, you know, is the government giving funding to FEMA, to people surviving a natural disaster with FEMA? So using social media or other ads to dispel those rumors as well. We talked about rogue websites, this idea of people either commenting about a company and creating their own website. There's a whole one about like Walmart and the business practices of Walmart online. They're all over the place, right? There's websites about the anti-vaxxer movement. Whenever there's a natural disaster, we kind of end up with these independent websites that are, hey, the government is not doing this. Sometimes they disguise themselves as news organizations. They may not be news organizations. They might be lobbying organizations, right? That are seeking negative information. They sometimes disguise themselves as an organization itself, right? So I talked about the Jeb Bush situation. That's a very good example. And this is on page 85 in the Fern Banks book. If you're in the class and you're reading that, you can go read some more about different websites that exist. So John Upshaw and the NFPL. So John Upshaw was the leader of the National Football League Players Association, and he was accused of showing preference to younger players over older players. He basically came back, you know, after the press released several stories and said, I actually never said that information. I am not hostile to retired players. I was a player myself, like, and so he had this mantra, go look at the facts and tell me, tell them, and if any of them are true, you can tell me about it and I'll clarify it. So he just always told people when there were rumors to go back to the facts. This is a problem because, you know, when things are emotional, people have their own perspective. Like, these people are after me. These people are not thinking of me, right? We see a lot of this with blaming different age groups, right? Saying these people don't do this or these people do this because of their age group. When the truth is that, or because of race or gender or sexual orientation, right? But the thing is, a lot of times the facts don't point to those things. They're just people jumping to conclusions about what they think might be the case. So check this case out. This is in the Laney Davis book that we read, Crisis Tales, in my class. But you can actually also go watch this AP video about John Upshaw if you have any questions. Sadly, he passed away from cancer, you know, but they did still talk about these issues when he died. So, you know, your reputation is also determined by what you do in your lifetime and what kind of narratives are generated in your lifetime. Another example of this is Dan Snyder and the Washington Redskins. So in 2011, a reporter named McKenna wrote an opinion article in the Washington City paper, basically saying that Dan Snyder was not a really good person and criticized him for using the name the Redskins. Dan Snyder kind of was really irritated by that and said that there were a lot of facts that were wrong on this and it was a defamatory falsehood, so he filed a suit. There are some similarities here with Upshaw in that some of the things Dan Snyder had actually said, but they were taken in a different guise, right? They were just taken in a different way than they were actually intended to be taken. And because McKenna had written an opinion piece rather than a news article, there were certain things that were protected about what he said. There's specific ground rules in cases dealing with libel or defamatory falsehood or any sort of, you know, case against the press. Upshaw and his lawyers didn't ever go to court, so that wasn't an issue, right? He just said, go look at the facts. Well, Dan Snyder got really angry and then said a bunch of things that he really didn't need to say. And it became extremely hard to say that he hadn't said some of the things that were in this article. So then when they do go to court, McKenna wins because freedom of the press is protected and it was an opinion article and not a factual statement. But what really came out of this was this idea of a David and Goliath narrative. So Dan Snyder was being attacked by the big press. However, the Washington City paper isn't a very large circulation paper. And, you know, a lot of the fans of the Redskins weren't actually reading it. So it was very important. This narrative kind of changed after Robert Griffin III was brought on. He was the Heisman Trophy winner from Baylor University that year. And so that really changed the narrative that took place in this. Fans kind of forgot about the whole case. The case was dropped against the city paper and we all moved on, right? Dan Snyder's still a really wealthy man who owns the Washington Redskins. So rumors, we can combat those. We can make a difference in how we respond. It's a lot of responsibility and challenge, though, for someone practicing public relations. But I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Like I said, if you want to watch those videos that were included in here, I have those also listed in the video link below. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at mediatingmimi@gmail.com. Have a great day, guys.